The black Mercedes-Benz 320 convertible B rounded the hairpin turn at Krčmerovo Street in Prague's Liban district at exactly 8:32 in the morning. Behind the wheel sat SS Oberscharfer Johannes Klein, 31 years old from Dusseldorf, hands steady on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. In the front passenger seat rode SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich, 38 years old, architect of the Holocaust, and the third most powerful man in Nazi Germany. The car slowed for the sharp curve. Posted speed, 15 kilometers per hour. Actual speed, Klein estimated 12. On the sidewalk, 29-year-old Josef Gabčík from Bulovka, Slovakia, stepped forward. His right hand gripped a modified British Sten Mark II submachine gun concealed beneath his raincoat. 28-year-old Jan Kubiš from Dolny Villamovis, Moravia, stood 3 meters behind him, cradling a converted anti-tank mine in a leather briefcase. Gabčík raised a Sten, aimed at Heydrich's chest from 4 meters away, pulled the trigger. Nothing. The gun jammed. Heydrich stood up in the open-top car. Instead of ordering Klein to accelerate, he drew his Luger pistol and aimed at Gabčík. Klein reached for his own weapon. Kubiš threw the mine. Before we continue with what happened in those next 3 seconds that changed the course of World War II, if you're fascinated by these untold stories of incredible courage and impossible decisions during humanity's darkest conflict, subscribe and hit the notification bell. We publish deeply researched, long-form documentaries every week that bring you the complete story, not just the headlines. 92% of you watching aren't subscribed yet. Join the community that believes history deserves more than surface-level coverage. Now, back to Prague, May 27, 1942, and the moment that would cost 5,000 lives. For months and 29 days earlier, Josef Gabčík sat in the cramped fuselage of a British Handley Page Halifax bomber, breathing through an oxygen mask as the aircraft crossed into protectorate airspace at 4,000 meters altitude. Temperature outside, minus 28 degrees Celsius. Time, 2:17 hours. Beside him sat Jan Kubiš, Adolf Apalka, 30 years old from Prague, and 4 other Czech and Slovak paratroopers. Operation Anthropoid, named after the scientific term for having human characteristics, represented the Czechoslovak government in exile's most desperate gamble. The target, Reinhard Heydrich, the man Hitler called the man with the iron heart. The green light flashed at 2:22 hours. Gabčík jumped first. The slipstream tore him away at 240 kilometers per hour. His static line deployed the X-type parachute. Then the line snapped. He fell 1,500 meters in free fall, frantically pulling his reserve chute. It opened at 300 meters altitude. He crashed into a snowbank outside Nevezdy, 25 kilometers east of Prague, dislocating his left shoulder on impact. Kubiš landed safely 2 kilometers away. The equipment container with their weapons and explosives landed 4 kilometers in the opposite direction. The Halifax bomber made it back to RAF Tangmere at 6:41 hours, burning its last 20 liters of fuel on approach. Reinhard Heydrich had arrived in Prague on September 27, 1941, as acting Reich Protector Bohemia and Moravia. Within 92 days, he had executed 400 Czech resistance members, sent thousands to concentration camps, and implemented a system so efficient that Czech war production exceeded pre-invasion levels. The British Special Operations Executive called him the Hangman. Czechs called him the Butcher of Prague. His official SS title, Chief of the Reich Security Main Office. Before Prague, Heydrich had chaired the Wannsee Conference on January 20th, 1942, 92 minutes that formalized a final solution. 15 men around a table in a villa overlooking Berlin's Wannsee Lake. 30 copies of the protocol distributed. 11 million Jews marked for extermination. But Heydrich had made one critical mistake: arrogance. He traveled through Prague in an open-top Mercedes without armored escort, the same route every morning. Hradčany Castle to his office at Wallenstein Palace. Departure time, 8:15 to 8:30 hours. Travel time, 23 minutes. The hairpin turn at Krčmerovo Street forced the car to slow to 15 kilometers per hour. Czech intelligence in London, led by František Moravec, 51 years old, passed this information to the Special Operations Executive. On October 3, 1941, they selected 2 men for the mission. Josef Gabčík had joined the Czech army at 18. When Germany invaded on March 15, 1939, he escaped to Poland, then France, then Britain, a journey of 8,300 kilometers over 11 months. He spoke 4 languages: Slovak, Czech, German, and broken English. Height, 172 centimeters. Weight, 68 kilograms. Distinguishing features? None. The SOE psychological evaluation described him as determined, capable of violence, comfortable with death. Jan Kubiš came from a family of 11 children. His father, Jan Kubiš Sr., worked in a limestone quarry for 32 years. Young Jan learned to handle explosives in the Czech Army's engineering corps. When Germany invaded, he followed the same escape route as Gabčík. They met for the first time on a troop ship to England in June 1940. The SOE evaluation: technically proficient, emotionally stable, willing to die for mission success. Neither man had married. Neither had children. Both volunteered, knowing they would not return. The Special Training School 23 sat outside Camberley, Surrey, 74 kilometers southwest of London. For 83 days, Gabčík and Kubiš trained 16 hours daily. Weapons: Sten submachine guns, Colt 1903 pistols, commando knives, hand grenades, and a custom-modified anti-tank mine, weighing 6.5 kilograms. Explosives: expert Lieutenant Colonel Colin Gubbins, 46 years old, personally supervised a mine conversion, removing the pressure plate, adding a time delay fuse with a 4.5-second delay after impact. They studied 347 photographs of Heydrich, memorized his schedule, his habits, his security details, learned to strip and reassemble a Sten gun in 14 seconds while blindfolded, practiced the ambush sequence 700 times at a mock-up street corner built to match Krčmerova's exact dimensions, measured from intelligence photographs down to the cobblestone spacing. Kubiš trained to throw the mine from precisely 3.2 meters, aiming for the right rear wheel well. Impact point calculations: the explosion would project upward and forward, directing shrapnel into the passenger compartment at an angle of 42 degrees. Gabčík's role: primary shooter. If Kubiš's throw failed, the Sten's 32-round magazine of 9 by 19 millimeters parabellum rounds would cut down Heydrich and Klein in 2.3 seconds of sustained fire at a cyclic rate of 550 rounds per minute. On December 27, 1941, their commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Moravec, asked them a final question. "You understand you will not survive this mission?" Gabčík answered, "We understand. We volunteer anyway." For 151 days after landing, Gabčík and Kubiš lived in safe houses throughout Prague, moving every 11 days on average. The resistance network, codenamed Jindra, led by Ladislav Vanek, 34 years old, provided forged identity papers, ration cards, and intelligence updates. They worked day labor jobs. Gabčík at a quarry outside Zbraslav, Kubiš at a machine shop in Nussel. Both sent regular reports to London via encrypted radio transmissions, operating a Type 3 Mk2 transceiver from various attics, basements, and warehouses. Transmission time: never more than 8 minutes to avoid German radio detection units. By May 1942, they had identified 3 possible ambush sites. Option 1, Wallenstein Palace approach. Distance from Hrakeni, 600 meters. Problem: heavy foot traffic, multiple guard posts, minimal cover for escape. Option 2, Troja Bridge. Straight road, high speed, impossible to force the car to slow. Rejection: Sten effective range 30 meters. Moving target at 60 kilometers per hour equals 0.9 second engagement window. Unacceptable margin of error. Option 3, Krčmerova Street hairpin turn. Force slow down to 12-15 kilometers per hour. Escape route through Liben district's dense residential streets to the Vltava River. 600 meters to St. Cyril and Methodius Cathedral. Primary safe house. Decision: optimal. On May 23, 1942, British intelligence intercepted German communications indicating Heydrich would travel to Berlin on May 29 for meetings with Hitler. The window: for days. May 25th, reconnaissance confirmed Heydrich maintained his routine. Departure between 8:15 and 8:30. Same route. No additional security. May 26th, Gabčík and Kubiš received final approval from London via radio at 23:47 hours. Message length: 18 words. Execute Anthropoid. Confirm target identity. Use lethal force. Acknowledge. Response sent at 23:52 hours. Acknowledged. Tomorrow. Neither man slept that night. Josef Gabčík woke at 6:15 hours in the apartment at 13 Biskupkova Street, 2.4 kilometers from the ambush site. Jan Kubiš woke at the same moment in a separate safe house at 24 Zitna Street. Coordinated timing, no telephone calls, no contact. The plan required both men to arrive independently at Krčmerova Street by 8 o'clock hours. Gabčík dressed in a gray wool suit, white shirt, dark tie, standard civilian attire. He disassembled the Sten gun into 4 components: barrel assembly, bolt assembly, magazine housing, and shoulder stock. Each piece wrapped in newspaper, then placed inside a leather briefcase alongside the loaded 32-round magazine. Total weight, 3.1 kilograms. He checked his Colt 1903 pistol. 7 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. He had fired this exact weapon 432 times during training. Every round had fed perfectly. At 7:18 hours, he left the apartment. Temperature, 17 degrees Celsius. Sky, overcast, low cloud ceiling at 800 meters. Barometric pressure dropping. Rain expected by midday. He walked to the Karlin tram station, boarded the number 8 tram at 7:31 hours, paid 15 hellers for a ticket, and rode 3 stops to Liben. Kubiš followed a different route. His briefcase contained a converted anti-tank mine wrapped in a wool blanket, the fuse assembly, and a backup Colt pistol. Weight, 7.2 kilograms. He carried it carefully. The mine would detonate from excessive impact, even without the fuse installed. At 8:04 hours, Gabčík reached the hairpin turn. He positioned himself at the tram stop on the northwest corner. Clear sightline down Krčmerovo Street. 35 meters of visibility before the curve. The Sten would be assembled and ready in 12 seconds when he saw the Mercedes approaching. Kubiš arrived at 8:11 hours, positioning himself on the opposite side of the street, partially concealed behind a pole. Between them, the killing zone. Width, 4.2 meters. The Mercedes would enter this space at approximately 12 kilometers per hour, taking 1.26 seconds to traverse from Gabčík's position to Kubiš's. Also present, Adolf Apalka, standing 50 meters away as a lookout. His signal, raising a mirror to reflect sunlight when the Mercedes departed Hrakeni Castle. With no sunlight due to cloud cover, he would use a hand signal, removing his hat. At 8:19 hours, a different car, a black Thatcher 77, navigated the turn. Both assassins tensed, then relaxed. Wrong vehicle. At 8:24 hours, a man in a brown coat walked past Gabčík, glanced at him, and continued. Gestapo? Civilian? Impossible to know. Gabčík's heart rate elevated to 132 beats per minute. He forced himself to breathe slowly, a technique taught at Camberley. For seconds in, hold 4 seconds. For seconds out. Heart rate dropped to 98. At 8:27 hours, a tram rattled past, temporarily blocking sightline. It cleared at 8:28. At 8:30 hours, 50 meters away, Adolf Apalka removed his hat. The Mercedes-Benz was coming. Gabčík opened his briefcase and removed the first Sten component. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory from 700 repetitions. Barrel assembly into receiver, 3 seconds. Bolt and return spring inserted, 2 seconds. Magazine housing locked, 1 second. Shoulder stock attached, 1 second. Magazine inserted and charging handle pulled, 2 seconds. Total assembly time, 9 seconds. The Mercedes appeared at the far end of Krčmerovo Street at 8 hours, 31 minutes, and 47 seconds. Distance, 112 meters. Speed, approximately 30 kilometers per hour on the straight approach. At 8 hours, 32 minutes, and 3 seconds, Klein touched the brake pedal as they entered the curve. Speed reduced to 14 kilometers per hour. Gabčík stepped into the street at 8 hours, 32 minutes, and 11 seconds. 4 meters from the approaching car, he raised the Sten, aiming center mass at Heydrich's torso. The front sight aligned with the target's chest. Range, 4 meters. Even with the Sten's notorious inaccuracy, hitting a stationary human-sized target at this distance approached 100% probability. He pulled the trigger at 8 hours, 32 minutes, and 13 seconds. The firing pin struck the primer. Nothing happened. The Sten had jammed. Post-war ballistics analysis identified the failure. A defective spring in the magazine feed mechanism combined with moisture contamination. The Sten Mark II, while simple and cheap to manufacture, suffered from chronic reliability issues. British military reports documented a failure rate of 1 jam per 120 rounds fired under ideal conditions. Under field conditions, moisture, dirt, temperature variation, the rate increased to 1 jam per 60 rounds. Gabčík had test-fired this weapon 4 days earlier. 73 rounds through 2 magazines, 0 failures. But he had carried it exposed to morning humidity for 28 minutes. Condensation had formed inside the magazine well. A single water droplet, approximately 0.04 milliliters, had created sufficient friction between the magazine spring coils to prevent the first round from feeding into the chamber. The entire mechanical failure occurred in 0.08 seconds. Heydrich's response time, 0.3 seconds. Instead of ordering Klein to accelerate, Heydrich stood up in the moving car, drew his Luger P-08 pistol from his belt holster, and aimed at Gabčík. This decision, to fight rather than flee, would prove fatal. Klein simultaneously reached for his Walther PPK pistol while attempting to maintain control of the still-moving vehicle. Kubiš, seeing Gabčík's gun fail, had already begun his throwing motion at 8 hours 32 minutes and 12 seconds. The modified mine left his hand at 8 hours 32 minutes and 14 seconds, traveling in a parabolic arc toward the right rear wheel of the Mercedes. Flight time, 0.4 seconds. Impact time, 8 hours 32 minutes and 14.4 seconds hours. The mine struck the right rear wheel at the junction of the tire sidewall and the fender well. The impact fuse triggered instantaneously. The main charge, 4.5 kilograms of composition B explosive, detonated with a force equivalent to 6 kilograms of TNT. Detonation velocity, 7,900 meters per second. The explosion fragmented the mine casing into approximately 3,800 pieces of shrapnel, ranging from 3 millimeters to 42 millimeters in size. The blast wave expanded spherically at initial velocity exceeding 3,000 meters per second, degrading rapidly as it displaced air molecules. The right rear portion of the Mercedes disintegrated. The tire exploded. The fender tore away. The fuel tank ruptured but did not ignite. The explosion temperature peaked at 2,400 degrees Celsius for 0.003 seconds, insufficient duration to ignite gasoline vapor. Shrapnel penetrated the passenger compartment at an upward angle of 38 degrees, slightly lower than the calculated 42 degrees due to Kubiš's throw being 15 centimeters short of the optimal 3.2-meter distance. Heydrich, standing upright in the car, took direct hits. A fragment measuring 27 millimeters by 14 millimeters by 4 millimeters, later recovered during autopsy, struck his left rib cage at the 8th intercostal space, penetrating between the ribs and entering the thoracic cavity. It lacerated the diaphragm, nicked the spleen, and lodged in the retroperitoneal space near the left kidney. A second fragment, 11 millimeters by 8 millimeters, embedded in his left forearm. Multiple smaller fragments peppered his face, neck, and right thigh, 17 separate wounds cataloged during subsequent medical examination. Klein took shrapnel hits to his face and right shoulder. Neither wound proved life-threatening. The explosion shattered windows in 7 buildings within a 40-meter radius. A fragment struck a tram passing 103 meters away, embedding in the wooden door frame. Blast overpressure measured approximately 15 psi at Heydrich's position, sufficient to cause pulmonary contusion and temporary deafness. Duration of the explosion event from detonation to final shrapnel impact, 1.8 seconds. At 8 hours 32 minutes and 16 seconds, Reinhard Heydrich collapsed back into the Mercedes, blood spreading across his uniform tunic. Kubiš, partially shielded by the telephone pole, took minor shrapnel wounds to his face and forehead. He immediately drew his Colt pistol and fired 2 rounds at Klein. Both missed. He ran toward his bicycle position 30 meters away. Gabčík, still holding the useless Sten, faced Heydrich and Klein. Klein had retrieved his Walther and was attempting to aim despite blood streaming from his facial wounds. Gabčík dropped the Sten, drew his Colt, and fired 3 rounds at Klein. The first missed. The second struck the Mercedes' windshield frame. The third hit Klein's right shoulder, causing him to drop his weapon. Heydrich, despite his wounds, retrieved his own Luger and fired at Gabčík. 2 rounds. Both missed. Heydrich's vision was compromised by blood and shock. Gabčík ran. He made it 15 meters before a Czech policeman, approximately 45 years old, attempted to stop him. Gabčík struck him in the face with the Colt's grip and continued running. Distance covered in next 90 seconds, 400 meters, navigating through residential streets toward the Vltava River. Kubiš mounted his bicycle and pedaled toward the opposite direction, heading for a safe house in Žižkov district. Distance to safe house, 2.1 kilometers. Travel time, 11 minutes. At the ambush site, Heydrich attempted to pursue Gabčík on foot. He made it 12 meters before collapsing against a telegraph pole. Klein, despite his shoulder wound, ran after Kubiš but abandoned pursuit after 30 meters. At 8:34 hours, a Czech truck driver, 41-year-old Tomáš Baušek, stopped his truck at the scene. Klein commandeered the vehicle at gunpoint and ordered Baušek to drive Heydrich to Bulovka Hospital. Distance, 3.8 kilometers. They arrived at 8:47 hours. Heydrich walked into the hospital entrance under his own power, supported by Klein. He informed the admitting nurse, 26-year-old Marie Morakova, "I am Obergruppenführer Heydrich. I have been assassinated. Contact SS headquarters immediately." He collapsed in the entrance hall 13 seconds later. SS Brigadeführer Karl Hermann Frank, 44 years old, arrived at the hospital at 9:03 hours. He immediately ordered a security perimeter. 38 SS soldiers surrounding the hospital within 18 minutes. He telephoned Berlin at 9:11 hours. Hitler received the news at 9:24 hours Central European Time. Dr. Josef Holbaum, 53 years old, chief surgeon at Bulovka Hospital, examined Heydrich at 9:18 hours. Initial assessment: shock from blood loss, multiple penetrating wounds, probable internal bleeding, blood pressure 90/60, pulse 114, respiratory rate 28 per minute, skin pale, clammy, cold extremities indicating peripheral vasoconstriction. X-rays taken at 9:41 hours revealed a large shrapnel fragment lodged near the left kidney and multiple smaller fragments throughout the torso. Dr. Holbaum recommended immediate surgery. Hitler ordered Professor Walter Dick, 49 years old, his personal physician, to fly from Berlin to Prague. Dick departed Tempelhof Airport at 10:15 hours in a Junkers Ju-52 transport. Flight time, 1 hour 37 minutes. At 9:52 hours, Dr. Holbaum began emergency surgery without waiting for Professor Dick. He administered local anesthesia, spinal block at L3, L4 vertebral space, rather than general anesthesia due to Heydrich's unstable condition. The patient remained conscious throughout the procedure. The surgery lasted 2 hours and 28 minutes. Dr. Holbaum removed a large shrapnel fragment from near the left kidney, sutured the damaged spleen and diaphragm, and cleaned visible contamination from the peritoneal cavity. He removed 17 smaller fragments, left 4 fragments deemed too dangerous to extract, and closed with 43 sutures. Total blood loss estimated at 1.2 liters. Heydrich received 3 transfusions totaling 2.1 liters of blood type A positive from SS volunteer donors. Professor Dick arrived at 12:24 hours, examined the patient, reviewed Dr. Holbaum's surgical notes, and approved the treatment plan. Heydrich's condition at 1300 hours, stable but critical. Dick estimated 60% survival probability if infection could be prevented. The problem: Kubiš's briefcase had been lying in the dirt. The mine had been lying in the briefcase. The explosion had driven fragments of leather, wool fiber, dirt, and street debris deep into Heydrich's internal organs. Penicillin, discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928, existed, but mass production had only begun in 1942. The entire American and British supply was reserved for Allied military casualties. Germany had no penicillin manufacturing capability. Without antibiotics, infection was inevitable. Karl Hermann Frank issued emergency Decree 54 out of 42 at 14:11 hours. Martial law throughout the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, effective immediately. Curfew from 21 to 6 o'clock hours. All public transportation suspended. All businesses closed except hospitals and essential services. Frank established immediate rewards. 10 million Reichsmarks for information leading to the assassins. Capture 1 million Reichsmarks for information on safe houses or collaborators guaranteed amnesty for accomplices who turned themselves in before June 18th. For context, 10 million Reichsmarks in 1942 equal approximately $600,000, purchasing power equivalent to roughly $11 million today. By 1600 hours, the Gestapo had arrested 347 people for suspicious behavior near Kirchmayr Street. By 2300 hours, 1,203 arrests. By June 1st, 4,719 arrests. The Gestapo employed systematic interrogation. Start with family members of known resistance contacts. Proceed to anyone who lived within 500 meters of safe houses identified in previous operations. Expand to anyone with British connections. Check military service or anti-German statements reported by informants. Torture techniques. Beatings, water torture, sleep deprivation, stress positions, threatened execution of family members. The Gestapo's Prague headquarters at Petschek Palace processed an average of 67 interrogations per day throughout June 1942. On May 28th, the Gestapo offered additional incentives. Families of persons providing information would receive food ration increases, an extra 200 grams of bread per day, 50 grams of butter per week. In a protectorate where malnutrition affected an estimated 43% of the population, This represented significant motivation. Despite this, the Czech resistance held. For 21 days, not a single person betrayed Gabčík and Kubiš. May 28th, Heydrich conscious, alert, speaking normally, blood pressure stable, at 105/70. Temperature, 37.1 degrees Celsius, normal. Professor Dick noted in his medical log, patient remarkably stable. Prognosis improved to 75% survival. May 29th, temperature rise to 37.8 degrees Celsius. Heydrich complained of nausea. Dick administered morphine for pain management. 15 milligram subcutaneous injection every 4 hours. May 30th, temperature 38.4 degrees Celsius. White blood cell count elevated to 14,000 per microliter, indicating immune response to infection. Heydrich's abdomen showed signs of peritoneal irritation. Pain, guarding rebound tenderness. Dick diagnosed post-surgical infection, likely peritonitis from contaminated fragments. May 31st, Heydrich received a telegram from Hitler. Beyond medical recovery, you have shown that a true SS officer faces death with courage. Your sacrifice will be remembered for 1,000 years. Heydrich, heavily medicated, dictated a response. I remain confident in recovery and return to duty within 2 weeks. He would not return to duty. June 1st, temperature 39.1 degrees Celsius. Blood pressure dropping, 92/58. Heart rate climbing, 126 beats per minute. Heydrich drifted in and out of consciousness. Dick noted, severe sepsis, likely source intra-abdominal infection with contaminated foreign bodies. June 2nd, Heydrich unconscious for extended periods. Temperature 39.6 degrees Celsius. Abdominal distension, indicating fluid accumulation. Dick attempted surgical drainage, removed 430 milliliters of purulent fluid from the peritoneal cavity. Culture later identified Clostridium perfringens, gangrene bacteria, almost certainly introduced by horsehair or leather fragments from Kubiš's briefcase. June 3rd, multiple organ failure beginning. Kidneys producing minimal urine output. Oliguria indicating renal shutdown. Liver enzymes elevated, indicating hepatic compromise. Respiratory rate increasing. Compensatory mechanism for metabolic acidosis. June 4th, for 30 hours, Heydrich's blood pressure dropped to 60/40. Pulse 162, weak and thready. Respirations 38 per minute, shallow. Professor Dick administered cardiac stimulants, ephedrine, caffeine, with minimal effect. At 4:47 hours, Heydrich lost consciousness permanently. At 4:53 hours, his heart stopped. Resuscitation attempts, none. Professor Dick declared Reinhard Heydrich deceased at 4:53 hours, June 4th, 1942. Cause of death: septicemia secondary to multiple penetrating trauma with retained contaminated foreign bodies, resulting in multi-organ system failure. Time from injury to death: 7 days, 20 hours, 21 minutes. Age of death: 38 years, 7 months, 3 days. Gabčík and Kubiš have spent the 8 days since the ambush hiding in multiple safe houses throughout Prague. They moved locations 11 times, staying nowhere longer than 31 hours. The resistance network shuffled them through apartments, basements, warehouses, and churches, always 2 steps ahead of Gestapo raids. On June 4th, at approximately 11 o'clock hours, 6 hours after Heydrich's death, both men were relocated to the Church of St. Cyril and Methodius at Reslova Street in Prague's New Town district. The church served as a safe house for 7 Czech Paratroopers: Gabčík, Kubiš, Adolf Apalka, Josef Valsik, 32 years old, Jan Ruby, 29 years old, Yaroslav Svark, 27 years old, and Joseph Bublik, 28 years old. The church crypt, access to a small door behind the altar, measured approximately 12 meters long by 8 meters wide by 2.4 meters high. Stone walls 60 centimeters thick. Single air vent, dimensions 20 centimeters by 40 centimeters at street level. One entrance, the door they had entered through. No emergency exit. No escape route. The paratroopers had weapons. For Colt pistols, 2 Sten guns, approximately 300 rounds of ammunition, and 17 hand grenades. They had food for 6 days and 100 liters of water stored in jerry cans. Bishop Goraz, 58 years old, who managed the church, blessed him and said, "If they find you here, this will become your tomb." He was correct. Karel Čurda, 27 years old from Nové Mesto na Moravě, walked into Gestapo headquarters at Petchek Palace at 9:17 hours on June 16, 1942. He had parachuted into Czechoslovakia as part of Operation Silver A on March 28, 1941, 14 months before Anthropoid. His mission, establish resistance networks in Moravia. For 20 days following Heydrich's assassination, Čurda had watched the Gestapo methodically destroy the resistance. Over 4,000 arrests, daily executions, the massacre at Lidice, which we will cover shortly, the promised amnesty deadline, June 18th, 2 days away. Čurda made his calculation, 10 million Reichsmarks versus certain execution if caught. He told the Gestapo everything. He identified safe house locations. He named resistance contacts. He described the paratroopers' training in Britain. He drew maps. He provided photographs from his own reconnaissance work that inadvertently included backgrounds showing other safe house locations. Most critically, he identified the families supporting the paratroopers. The Gestapo immediately arrested the Moravec family. Alois Moravec, 43 years old, his wife Marie, 41 years old, and their son Vlastimil Adam Moravec, 17 years old. Ada had served as a courier for the resistance, unknowingly transporting messages between safe houses. The Gestapo interrogated Ada first. Standard protocol. Start with the youngest, most vulnerable family member. They employed enhanced interrogation. Beatings, waterboarding, threats against his mother. Ada revealed nothing. The Gestapo then employed a different technique. They showed Ada his mother's severed head floating in a fish tank. It was not actually his mother's head. Marie Moravec was still alive in an adjacent cell. The head belonged to an unidentified woman from a morgue, approximately the same age and hair color as Marie Moravec. But Adam Moravec, 17 years old and already traumatized by torture, believed he was looking at his murdered mother. He broke. He told them about the Church of St. Cyril and Methodius. The Gestapo executed Adam Moravec at 4:30 hours on June 17th. They executed Alois Moravec at 4:37 hours. Marie Moravec had already taken a cyanide capsule during her interrogation. She died at 23:14 hours on June 16th, never knowing her son had broken. 750 SS soldiers and Gestapo agents surrounded the Church of St. Cyril and Methodius at 4:15 on June 18, 1942. Commander, SS Hauptsturmvereins Panwitz, 38 years old, head of the Gestapo's anti-resistance division in Prague. The first assault began at 4:23 hours. 40 SS soldiers entered through the main church entrance. Adolf Apolka, positioned in the choir loft with a Sten gun and 120 rounds of ammunition, opened fire at 4:24. The Sten's barrel overheated after 93 rounds fired in continuous bursts over 6 minutes. Apolka transitioned to his Colt pistol. Jan Ruby and Josef Valsic, positioned behind stone pillars and nave, threw hand grenades. The first exploded among SS soldiers near the entrance, causing casualties estimated at 6 wounded. The second bounced off a pillar and exploded in an empty pew, causing no casualties. The SS withdrew at 4:31 hours. Casualty count: 14 SS soldiers wounded, none seriously. Czech Paratrooper casualties: Apolka shot in the left shoulder, Valsic minor shrapnel wound to the leg. The SS did not immediately assault again. Instead, Panwitz ordered the building surrounded completely, soldiers every 5 meters. He called in reinforcements, 200 additional soldiers, 3 fire trucks, and a crew with demolition charges. At 4:47 hours, the Prague Fire Brigade arrived with pumps and hoses. Panwitz had discovered the crypt. His plan: flood it. The sewers connected to the church basement could deliver water at a rate of approximately 200 liters per minute. The crypt volume, approximately 230 cubic meters. Time to completely flood, 19 hours. But the goal was not complete flooding, just enough water to force the paratroopers out. At 5 o'clock hours, water began flowing into the crypt through the floor drain. Gabčík, Kubiš, Svark, and Bulovka were in the crypt when the water started rising. They initially blocked the drain with cloth and debris, but the water pressure forced it through. They tried to dig an escape tunnel through the air vent. The vent measured 20 centimeters by 40 centimeters, opening onto the street. Using a steel rod in their bare hands, they attempted to widen the vent. They managed to break away some of the stones around, expanding the opening to approximately 30 centimeters by 50 centimeters, still too small for a man to fit through. Above them, the battle in the church nave continued. Apolka, Ruby, and Valsic fired their remaining ammunition in disciplined bursts. By 5:30 hours, they were down to 8 rounds of pistol ammunition total. The SS attempted a second assault at 5:41 hours. This time, they used tear gas grenades thrown through broken windows. The church filled with CS gas. 2-chlorobenzalmalononitrile, a compound that causes a severe burning sensation in eyes, respiratory tract, and skin. Apolka, Ruby, and Valsic, unable to see or breathe, retreated toward the altar. The SS advanced. At 5:49 hours, all three paratroopers made their final decision. Adolf Apolka shot himself in the right temple with his last pistol round. He died instantly. Jan Ruby and Joseph Valsic each took cyanide capsules, potassium cyanide, approximately 150 milligrams, hidden in false buttons on their uniforms. Death occurred within 90 seconds from cellular anoxia as the cyanide inhibited cytochrome C oxidase, preventing cellular respiration. The SS found their bodies at 6:02 hours. In the crypt, water had risen to approximately 1.2 meters depth by 6 o'clock hours. Gabčík, Kubiš, Svark, and Bubik stood on makeshift platforms built from wooden crates to stay above water. Their ammunition was nearly exhausted, 23 pistol rounds and 4 hand grenades remaining. At 6:08 hours, SS soldiers located the crypt entrance, the small door behind the altar. They attempted to force it open. Gabčík fired through the door. 7 rounds. 2 SS soldiers wounded. The SS withdrew. At 6:13 hours, the SS tried a different approach. Demolition charges. They placed 15 kilograms of TNT against the crypt door and detonated at 6:14 hours. The door shattered. The explosion killed Josef Bulovka instantly. He was standing closest to the door. Shrapnel from the door's metal hinges struck him in the head and chest. The SS threw 6-stick grenades into the crypt. 4 exploded. 2 were duds. Yaroslav Svark took fatal shrapnel wounds to the abdomen and neck. He died at 6:17 hours. Joseph Gabčík and Jan Kubiš remained. The SS called for their surrender at 6:19 hours. Panwitz personally shouted to the broken door, "You have fought bravely. Surrender and you will be treated as prisoners of war under Geneva Convention protections." This was a lie. Hitler had issued explicit orders. The assassins were to be captured alive for interrogation, then executed publicly. Gabčík and Kubiš knew this. Gabčík fired his last 3 pistol rounds at SS soldiers visible through the doorway. No hits. He was standing chest deep in water, unable to steady his aim. At 6:24 hours, Jan Kubiš retrieved his last cyanide capsule. He bit down on it and died at 6:26 hours. Joseph Gabčík had no cyanide. He had 1 hand grenade left. At 6:27 hours, he pulled the pin, held it against his chest, and released the striker lever. The grenade exploded at 6:28 hours. SS soldiers entered the crypt at 6:31 hours and recovered 4 bodies. Medical examination confirmed all died before 6:30 hours. Operation Anthropoid was complete. All 7 paratroopers were deceased. The Gestapo had captured none alive. Total battle duration, 2 hours, 13 minutes. SS casualties, 14 wounded. 3 later died from wounds. Czech casualties, 7 deceased. Hitler received notification of Heydrich's death at 11:07 hours on June 4, 1942. His response, as recorded by Reich Minister Martin Bormann: "For every German, 10 Czech hostages will be shot. Every Czech who aided the assassins will be exterminated along with their entire family. We will erase their memory from history." Karl Hermann Frank implemented this order with bureaucratic precision. On June 9, 1942, 5 days after Heydrich's death, German security police surrounded the village of Lidice, located 22 kilometers northwest of Prague. Population, 503 civilians. The Germans claimed Lidice had harbored the assassins. This was false. No connection existed between Lidice and Operation Anthropoid. The village was selected because 2 Lidice men, serving in the Czechoslovak army in Britain, had families still living there. The Germans considered this sufficient justification. The security police arrived at 1945 hours on June 9th. They sealed all roads in and out of the village within 8 minutes. They assembled all residents in the village square by 2017 hours. The men, 192 males over age 15, were separated from women and children. The men were locked in the Horak Farms barn overnight. At 7 o'clock hours on June 10th, the executions began. The Germans divided the men into groups of 10. Each group was led to a mattress positioned against the barn wall. The mattress prevented bullet ricochets. A firing squad of 8 soldiers stood 5 meters away. The first group was executed at 7:04 hours. The process repeated every 7 minutes. By 1300 hours, 173 men had been executed. The remaining 19, who had been working night shifts at the Kladno mines and returned home during the execution, were shot separately between 1,300 hours and 1,500 hours. Total male deaths, 192. The women, 195 total, were transported to Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany. 52 died in the camp from disease, starvation, or execution. The rest survived until liberation in April 1945. The children, 98 total, underwent racial evaluation by Nazi eugenics experts. 8 children deemed racially suitable were sent to German families for Germanization, forced adoption under German names. 7 of these 8 survived the war and were eventually returned to surviving family members. The remaining 90 children were sent to Chelmno extermination camp in occupied Poland. They were gassed in mobile gas vans using carbon monoxide from diesel exhaust. All 90 children died on July 2, 1942, ages ranging from 8 months to 16 years. Total Lidice casualties, 340 civilians. After the executions, German engineers systematically demolished the entire village. They burned every building, dynamited the ruins, filled in the village pond, and diverted the stream that ran through Lidice. They planted grain over the site to erase all evidence the village had existed. On June 24, 1942, the German government issued a public statement. The village of Lidice no longer exists. Lizaki, a small settlement in Pardubice region, population 34, had actually provided support to paratroopers. Specifically, they had hidden a resistance radio transmitter. The Gestapo raided Lizaki on June 24, 1942 at 5:30 hours. All 34 residents were arrested. The men, 11 total, were executed on site at 6:15 hours. The women, 20 total, were transported to Ravensbrück. 19 were executed there. 1 survived. The children, 3 total, were sent to Chelmno and gassed. The village was demolished completely. Total Lizaki casualties, 33. 1 survivor. Marie Supakova, 28 years old, released from Ravensbrück in 1945 due to administrative error. Beyond Lidice and Lizaki, the Germans executed an additional 1,346 Czechs between May 28 and July 3, 1942, in retaliation for Heydrich's assassination. The Berlin Gestapo executed 252 Czech Jews at Mauthausen concentration camp on June 10, officially for security reasons, actually retaliation. The Prague Gestapo executed 211 Czech resistance members identified through Karel Čurda's information between June 16th and June 30th. Total documented deaths directly attributable to Operation Anthropoid reprisals, 1,719. Estimated total including indirect deaths, deaths in concentration camps from subsequent roundups, and secondary reprisals, approximately 5,000. Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš killed Reinhard Heydrich at a cost of 5,000 Czech lives. Reinhard Heydrich's state funeral occurred on June 9, 1942, in Berlin. Hitler delivered a eulogy to 8,000 SS officers assembled at the Reich Chancellery. He was the ideal National Socialist, the perfect embodiment of Germanic virtues, and his death will be avenged 1,000-fold. Heydrich was buried at the Invalidenfriedhof Cemetery in Berlin. The exact location of his grave was kept secret after 1945. Soviet forces occupying Berlin removed the headstone and grave marker to prevent the site from becoming a neo-Nazi shrine. His remains are believed to still be there in an unmarked grave. Karel Čurda received his 10 million Reichsmarks reward, paid in 4 installments between June 18th and August 30th, 1942. He also received a new German identity, Karl Gerhardt, born April 12, 1915, in Munich. The Gestapo relocated him to Reichenberg, now Liberec, where he lived under guard protection, unemployed for the remainder of the war. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, Czech authorities arrested Čurda on May 20th, 1945. His trial lasted 3 days. On April 29, 1947, he was convicted of treason and collaboration. He was hanged at Pankrak prison in Prague on April 29, 1947, at 6 o'clock hours. Age at death, 33 years, 1 month, 17 days. His last words, "I just wanted the killing to stop." In 1947, the Czechoslovak government posthumously awarded the Order of the White Lion, the nation's highest honor, to all 7 paratroopers who died at the Church of St. Cyril and Methodius. Josef Gabčík, posthumously promoted to Major Jan Kubiš, posthumously promoted to Major Adolf Apalka, posthumously promoted to Captain Joseph Valsik, posthumously promoted to Lieutenant Jan Ruby, posthumously promoted to Lieutenant Yaroslav Svark, posthumously promoted to Sergeant Joseph Bublik, posthumously promoted to Sergeant. The church crypt where they died was converted into a memorial in 1947. It remains a museum today. The bullet holes in the walls were preserved. The vent they tried to escape through remains visible. A rectangular opening, 30 centimeters by 50 centimeters, still too small for a man to fit through. Approximately 40,000 visitors per year visit the memorial. The Sten gun that jammed was recovered by the Gestapo at the ambush site. It was sent to Waffen-SS weapons testing facility in Berlin for analysis. The examining officer, Hauptsturmführer Hans Klein, no relation to the driver, filed a report confirming the magazine's spring failure. After the war, the weapon disappeared. Its current location is unknown. Some historians believe it was destroyed during the Battle of Berlin in 1945. Others suggest it may be in a private collection. The anti-tank mine casing fragments were collected at the ambush site and are now housed at the Military History Institute in Prague. Total recovered fragments, 47 pieces, ranging from 12 millimeters to 108 millimeters in size. The shrapnel removed from Heydrich's body during autopsy was preserved in formaldehyde and stored at the German Institute for Forensic Medicine in Berlin. Soviet forces captured these specimens in April 1945. They were transported to Moscow and stored at the NKVD Medical Archives. After the Soviet Union's collapse, Czech authorities requested their return. Russia denied the request. Current status: presumably still in Russian archives, location undisclosed. Josef Gabčík's family in Slovakia learned of his death through British radio broadcasts in July 1942. His mother, Anna Gabčíková, died in 1944. His father, Andrei Gabčík, survived the war and lived until 1958. Neither parent ever spoke publicly about their son's mission. Jan Kubiš's family in Moravia suffered more directly. The Gestapo arrested his father, Jan Kubiš Sr., on June 18, 1942, the day of the church siege. He was interrogated for 6 days, released due to lack of evidence connecting him to the mission, then rearrested on June 27th. He died in Mauthausen concentration camp on November 24, 1942. Cause of death listed as heart failure, likely a euphemism for execution or fatal beating. Kubiš's mother and siblings survived the war. The Moravec family, the family whose son Ada was tortured into revealing the church location, was completely destroyed. Father executed, mother suicide, son executed. The family name ended. Their house in Prague was seized by the German government, eventually returned to the Czech state, and demolished in 1978. A memorial plaque now marks the site. The Church of St. Cyril and Methodius reopened for services in 1945. The Czech Orthodox Church maintained it until 2013, when financial difficulties led to its transfer to the Czech state. It now operates as both an active church and a national memorial. The crypt remains exactly as it was on June 18, 1942, except for removal of the 4 bodies given state funerals, removal of blood and human tissue, hygiene requirements, installation of memorial plaques, 1947, installation of lighting, 1965, waterproofing the floor, 1988. The same drain that flooded the crypt still exists but is now sealed. Visitors can see the bullet holes in the walls, approximately 247 visible impacts, the damaged air vent they tried to escape through the positions where each paratrooper died, marked with plaques, personal effects recovered, 3 buttons, a belt buckle, fragments of cloth, 1 bent spoon. The church gift shop sells postcards, books, and replica medals. Revenue supports memorial maintenance. Modern Czech historians have increasingly questioned the mission's strategic value while acknowledging the paratroopers' courage. Professor Robert Jerworth, author of Hitler's Hangman, The Life of Heydrich, 2011, argues, the assassination was militarily unnecessary and strategically counterproductive. Heydrich's administrative functions were immediately filled. The reprisals devastated Czech resistance infrastructure. The Holocaust continued unchanged. However, the mission achieved a psychological objective, proving that resistance was possible. Czech historian Jan Boris Uller counters, judging the mission only by immediate military impact ignores its political necessity. The government in exile faced credibility questions from the Allies. Czechoslovakia needed to demonstrate active resistance to ensure post-war independence. Anthropoid achieved that goal. Modern Czech polls, 2022 survey by Charles University, Prague, show 68% of Czechs consider the mission heroic and necessary. 21% consider heroic, but strategically questionable. 11% consider a tragic mistake. Every Czech school child learns about Anthropoid. It's mandatory curriculum. On June 10, 1947, 5 years after Massacre, Czech authorities began constructing a memorial at the Lidice site. The original village remained buried under grain fields. The memorial was built adjacent to the site. The Lidice Memorial includes museum documenting the massacre, opened 1962, rose garden with roses donated from around the world, currently 12,000 rose bushes, bronze sculptures of 82 children who died, installed 2,000 monuments listing all 340 names. Every year on June 10th, a memorial service occurs. Attendance typically ranges from 5,000 to 8,000 people. The Czech president usually attends. Multiple foreign dignitaries attend. Since 1955, 179 communities worldwide have renamed themselves Lidice in memory, including towns in Mexico, Brazil, Venezuela, and Illinois. Operation Anthropoid succeeded in its primary objective, killing Reinhard Heydrich. The mission failed in its implicit secondary objective, avoiding catastrophic reprisals. The strategic impact remains debated. What remains undebatable? 7 men chose certain death over surrender, believed their sacrifice had meaning, and died fighting against one of history's most evil regimes. Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš knew they would die. They volunteered anyway. They trained for 3 months to execute a mission lasting 1.8 seconds, the duration of the explosion that killed Heydrich. They survived for 22 days afterward. They spent their final 90 minutes standing chest deep in rising water, firing their last rounds, and choosing death on their own terms rather than capture. The last image captured the church crypt before the bodies were removed shows this. For men, water to their chests, weapons empty, having fought 750 SS soldiers to a standstill for 2 hours and 13 minutes. They never surrendered. The Czech motto, adopted after the war. We will never forget. They haven't. On May 27, 2042, 100 years after the assassination, the Czech government planned a centennial memorial ceremony. The Church of St. Cyril and Methodius will host international dignitaries. The 7 paratroopers will be honored. The 5,000 who died in reprisals will be remembered. History remembers Reinhard Heydrich as an architect of genocide. History remembers Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš as the men who proved that even Hitler's man with the iron heart could fall. The question remains, was it worth 5,000 lives to kill one monster? History cannot answer that question. Only those 5,000 could, and they are gone. What history can confirm? On May 27, 1942, at 8:32 hours, a Sten gun jammed, a mine exploded, and the trajectory of World War II shifted in ways large and small. Some changes were immediate and visible. Others rippled forward through time, subtle but permanent. The names Gabčík and Kubiš are taught to every Czech child. The name Heydrich is remembered only as a warning. Perhaps that is answer enough.